Hi all, let's look at another interesting game from the GRENKE chess classic. So the 2018 edition, Magnus Carlsen playing white against Yifan. In the previous edition of the GRENKE classic, they had reverse colours. Magnus was black, it was a Sicilian defence, and actually it ended in a draw. So Yifan is a very, very tough opponent. Of course, Magnus Carlsen is outrating her, but Magnus is the top-rated player in the world, of course. E4 from Magnus playing white. E5. We have already a surprise, the bishop's opening. So the bishop moves instead of the conventional knight f3. It's trying to avoid so much opening theory of knight f3 and get the opponent to improvise. I mean, that's a nice idea generally that I tend to use as well, playing offbeat stuff. So knight f6, d3, c6. Queen e2, it seems to discourage d5 because the e5 pawn will be exposed. Bishop e7, knight f3. Black does to protect the pawn. In fact, if you look at this position, I think black could actually just set a little trap, which Magnus is not going to fall into, I guess, because of the check. It's not going to happen, no. But d6 anyway. c3, knight bd7. Bishop drops back, both sides castle. a5. Magnus doesn't mind his bishop being kicked back to c2. He could consider a5, but it's setting up a target on a4 potentially. So actually we have d4, not minding a4, bishop drops back. Rook e8, rook e1, bishop f8, and it looks as though e takes might be a concern, or d5, because of that queen's position. The queen actually drops back to d1. We have b5, so quite aggressive play on the queen side. Knight bd2, queen c7, knight f1, g6, bishop g5. Now here actually it looks as though white wants to play queen d2 and never have to allow h6, so it's understandable, this h6. Engines don't like it, funny enough. It does create a target by playing h6. Bishop g7, queen d2. From a human point of view, though, it is comfortable that it's h6 has been ruled out, bishop h6 at any time. So it's kind of understandable, this h6, kicking the bishop back. Keeps on this diagonal, eyeing h6 for this battery later, to threaten that poor little h-pawn. Bishop g7, knight g3, knight b6. As though knight c4 is a bit of a concern, so that's kind of parried actually in advance, b3, taking away the c4 square. A takes, we have an exchange of rooks. The queen comes to a1 to recapture. Bishop g4, and it looks as though some players would be concerned about this potentially structural concession. Magnus actually invites it, this doubling of pawns, and he hits h6. Black does take the opportunity to double the pawns, and now just moves this pawn actually. And at this point, it seems black's actually fine, technically. Queen e7, bishops come off. Queen g5 with the big threat of knight f5 check, with that g-pawn pinned. Black unpins the g6 pawn. Now f4, maybe trying to open up this bishop and create some tactical ideas. Once that bishop's opened up, the pawn will be pinned again sometimes, and h5 might drop off. But that's not going to happen at this level. That easily. Knight fd7 instead, keeping the bishop locked in, wanting the exchange of queens. Magnus senses he might be okay with the exchange of queens, and now we have f takes, undoubling white's pawns. So if you look at the endgame configuration, bishop and knight against the two knights, rook d1, so white's rook is ready to seize an entry point on this d file with this move. Black plays rook e8, and now d takes e5, knight takes, f4, knight g4, and there's an entry point used, rook d6, putting pressure on c6, that's parried, rook d8, we have now king g7, knight f1, and it's here, knight f1 is a bit of it's a retreat, clearly, it's a retreat at move 34, and technically, it's here that black seems to start getting in trouble. Black played rook f6, which seems, logical in a way to hit the f pawn. But there's an ingenious little mini combination here played by Magnus. It seems, before we get into rook f6, it seems knight f6 might be just annoying, because white doesn't really want to play e5. E5, the knight goes down. Black actually has a big edge. It's hitting 2 pawns. That's not going to happen. So say, white has to, do something else. We could just repeat position, and that would be okay. For black to draw would be an achievement against Magnus Carlsen. Just repeat the position, knight g4. Okay, but instead of knight f1, there might be knight f3 here, I guess, but it's a game. So it seems as though overall, though, knight f6 seems safer. What was to say about this? So knight f6. So anyway, rook f6 was played. Now here, there's like a little combination. Magnus first kicks the knight, and the knight hasn't got e3 clearly, so it goes back to h6. And now the little combination. Can you see what white plays here? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here with white? Okay, f5. Yeah, it's trying to damage black's pawn chain. And it also, of course, protects the f pawn away from rook takes f4. Black takes, but now the point is, can you see? Knight g3, it forks both pawns, getting a pawn back potentially, or causing, it's structural damage really, long-term structural damage. Well, as long as these pawns are still on the board. Pinning the knight with rook g6, but now unpinning with king f2. Also, king h2 has some merits to it, protecting the h3 pawn, and might be technically stronger. So the pawns have been really damaged on this side. You can see that the pawns are damaged. White's trying to get back the material with advantage, with interest. It seems here a super accurate move might be rook g5. This wasn't played, but it seems as though black might be okay with rook g5. For example, taking on f5, h4, rook takes f5 check, and black should be fine here. In fact, black might even be better in some of these lines. So it is probably the scariest thing that black can do is rook g5. But f takes was played instead. This might be a place where black's kind of starting to slide downhill. So rook g5, if we just look at this again, knight takes f5, for example, here. Knight d5. Black's got enough, it seems, counterplay, because of h4, there's rook g3 coming up as an entry point for black's rook. So this should be fine as well for black. So it seems that was an opportunity, anyway, to play rook g5. Black instead plays f takes e4, and now white gets back his pawns. So equal on pawns now, 3 pawns each. And the bishop seems slightly superior. Black is forced now to unpin with f5. The bishop drops to g2. The knight's kind of offside at the moment. The rook's more active than black's rook. You can see that white's pieces have a better quality about them. And this just seems very annoying for black, this position. Knight f7, rook f8. Knight centralizes. But this one comes in hitting the rook. And now this drops a pawn as well now. Rook d6 drops a pawn. It's very, very awkward to do something. Here h4 looks as though it's going to win the pawn by force anyway. And like taking here, it's starting to get nasty. So the pawn is actually lost. Rook takes f5. So is this going to be just a grind? Knight bd7, king e2, king g7, h4, knight f7, bishop e4, knight d e5, check, king h6, knight g3, rook e6, king e3, the king's coming up, rook drops back, because this means now that the rook can use this A file and infiltrate maybe like that via the A file. The knight perches on F5 first though, check. King goes to attack the knight, potentially. Knight moves, bishop F3, check. And now, yeah, this one does encourage the bishop to snap it off, so fracturing black's pawns a little bit. Rook A1, yeah, this looks as though it's pure torture now for black. That knight on F5 is actually quite impressive. Outside pass pawn here, spare. King G8 check, King H7 pinning the knight. Black's running out of moves here after H5. We have King G8, Rook D7. It's pretty hopeless now for black. Black desperately gives up a pawn. Yeah, this is, it's difficult to do anything about D5 anyway. So this is a desperate giving up a pawn. C takes, and the game ended here. It's clear that the torture just continues. So, for example, King F8, just B5, for example, and then taking this one. So yeah, it's a positional kind of grind, this game, but it seems as though the little combination of great interest for me in this game, it seems as though black might have had, the way Magnus played it with King F2, might have had a chance with Rook G5. I think that was the critical moment where black might have been able to keep the position fairly stable. But when Magnus fractured black's pawns and eventually won a pawn, yeah, then it started to be really downhill. So a fine positional game example here, and using the unusual bishop's opening. So that seemed to work out quite well for Magnus in this game. Hope you got something out of it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.